My name is Adam Sachs, and I'm Director of Biodiversity for Livable Climate. So you can blame me for anything and everything that's going wrong here, and the rest of the world too, if you like. That's up to you. So now I'm going to give my talk. I hardly need to tell you this, but I'll say it anyway, that our immediate urgency has become painfully clear, especially. You want me to drink something? That's become painfully clear, especially over the past year, and dramatically so, is how extreme planetary disarray has become, and how quickly. And while it's not our purpose today to dwell on the current depth and level of crisis, we're all weary of hearing about it and even numb at times. Its immediacy and seriousness cannot be underestimated. We are here today to present real practical and immediate solutions in which we can all participate. The most important thing we can do to address our global emergencies, ecosystem destruction, and its stepchild, global warming, is to restore biodiversity and ecosystems worldwide. And therein lies great hope. We need to be clear, climate efforts will not succeed without eco-restoration. They simply will not. Greenhouse gases are a subset of what eco-restoration addresses, but not the primary issue as is commonly stated in the climate movement. Therefore, a frontal assault on carbon dioxide and equivalents can only fail because these are but a manifestation of the problem, not a root cause. Of course, we must eliminate fossil fuel emissions and their lethal symptoms, but that will not resolve our climate problem because our climate problem lies far deeper. We technocentric globalized humans tend to pay little notice, but on planet Earth, biology is practically everything. It has molded and it drives processes in the biosphere and beyond with tectonic force. From soils made of and held together by trees, other plants, microbes, and fungi, to cliffs of microscopic calcareous shells, to biotic pumps, trees driving water vapor from the ocean to the Amazon interior, to microbial mats stabilizing shorelines, to temperatures moderated by life-driven water cycles, to an oxygen atmosphere. This entire planet is molded by and directed by the infinitely complex web of life. It wasn't always so in the beginning for 1 billion years or so. Life was more or less in the closet, lurking in odd corners in oceans, limited by geological and astrophysical turmoil, cornered by upheavals that only single cells could evolve quickly enough to adapt to. But life turned out to be a master of adaptation. Yes, habitats had to be just right, but throw in some tincture of time, 2.5 billion years or so, and life began to figure out how to make its own bed. From single cells to collections of single cells to complex interactions of cells that grew into symbiotic and multicellular organisms, life eventually learned to create habitats favorable to itself. There is no longer any corner of the biosphere, from the upper atmosphere to deep ocean ridges, that is untouched by the vicissitudes of the living natural world. Earth isn't Mars or Venus, anywhere else that we yet know of in this vast, fascinating, but biologically inert universe for one and only one reason: life. This won't go on forever. This ever-changing blue-green planet will wilt and die over the next couple of billion years, subject to a dying sun, or perhaps suddenly from a deadly extraterrestrial impact. But for now, living creatures are lords of the orb. The power of life on Earth is often almost invisible in a culture that is steeped in the presumptive power of human technology. That climate is viewed first and foremost as a technological puzzle to be solved is witness to that. Although the thinking is starting to change, living systems have often been dismissed as significant drivers of climate, which is most unfortunate because the only way we humans are going to get out of this dilemma intact is by resorting to the oldest and most powerful technology on Earth and deploying it on every accessible square foot: photosynthesis. When our whiz-bang technologies, such as artificial trees, have been around for a couple of billion years, I'm happy to consider them. But until then, I'll stick with green plants, and their microbial, fungal, insect, bird, and animal friends. It will help if we collectively grasp in a most visceral way that we are not the center of the universe. Life on Earth is not all about us. It was here long before we arrived and will be here long after we're gone. Species come and go, and there is no reason whatsoever to think that Homo sapiens is any different. The dinosaurs made it for 165 million years. We've been around for 2 million or so if you count the early hominids, 200,000 if you just include us, the modern version. Especially considering the current accelerating extinction episode, our chances of breaking any records don't look too good. If we do not accept our humble role in the community of life as a premise, we will inevitably arrive at errant conclusions and false, futile solutions. No species can survive on Earth alone, and that's what this conference is about. The endlessly interesting and essential dynamics of the web of life, the interactions that make possible the existence of millions of species now alive on planet Earth, a mere 1% of all species that ever existed, and the countless millions more that had their moment in the sun or the dark pelagic depths or anywhere in between. We casually call this state of affairs biodiversity, which is in a simplistic sense a dismissal of a reality so complex that we are barely able to fathom its secrets. So what is biodiversity? First and foremost, it is a system. And like all systems, it is a whole that is far greater than the sum of its parts, concealing unending, mysterious, and emergent properties. It is a functioning living whole, a living whole that we can grasp for practical purposes, but more like an infinite onion as we attempt to peel away its intricate layers. Here are some of the facets of biodiversity with appreciation to Wheaton professor John Kreischer and his excellent book, The Balance of Nature, which, by the way, he says there isn't any. But I'm not going to go into that right now. We love to measure things and affix numbers to them. Guesses of numbers of species and subspecies currently in existence range from 3 million up to as many as 100 million, or even more. Truth be told, we don't know the numbers beyond educated guesses, and guesses that often disagree. How would you like to go and count all the species of tropical mites, for example, in your spare time? But if you say a whole lot of species, you'll be pretty much on the mark. It is likely that the single most important factor in the extinction of species is habitat fragmentation and loss, particularly in this human-dominated era, the Anthropocene. Some species are limited in range, some only have one small space on the entire planet, especially on islands, and when their home goes, so do they. But continental species, especially those that require territories unbroken by roads, fences, and cities, are far from exempt. Another extinction factor is invasive species, those without predators or pathogens to keep them in check, as they did in their native territory. They enjoy explosive growth and wreak havoc on habitats up and down the food chain. But an important point for me is that I think we all too often blame ourselves, the human race, for what has happened to the biosphere. One frequently hears statements such as, "We are so stupid." I may have even said it myself. That I've decided to give this form of self-hatred a name of its own. See if I can say it. Anthropo-antipathy. Got a couple of P's in there, kind of roll nicely. This then raises the question, is all the ecosystem destruction on Earth by human hands since the last ice age our fault? Is blame even a functional concept here? A parallel question might be, is it the asteroid's fault that the dinosaurs went extinct? Well, no, we might say, because it was an accident of the cosmos, where accidents abound, and the asteroid has no intention or will. At least that's what we assume about asteroid intelligence. We could apply a similar assessment to humans. The question being, how much are extinctions, and global warming for that matter, a consequence of our will, and how much is it simply a matter of our existence as an animal which must satisfy basic needs in order to survive? Our post-Ice Age transitions from hunter-gatherers to agro-pastoralists led to a dramatic change in many of our living conditions, including disease, most infectious disease did not exist back then, and land use. In doing so, we abandoned hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary biological assumptions that we're on a different path, the hunter-gatherer path, and haven't had time to adapt to the brave new world of aggressive human management of and separation from the rest of life. As a matter of fact, humans do not scale up well. We are small group animals, and population size changes everything. We work our way into what archaeologist and author Ronald Wright called progress traps, and we extricate ourselves with difficulty, if at all. Fossil fuels are one of many such progress traps that seemed like a good idea at the time. Poke a hole in the ground, get a gusher of oil, you save the whales, and you've got all these great perks that you can use, and you start using it everywhere, and all of a sudden it becomes very difficult to stop using it. But possibly the greatest trap ever was the departure from hunting and gathering and the development of agriculture, which, for all of its extraordinary perks, has led to a population explosion that began ravaging the earth 10,000 years ago and is reaching its culmination in the 21st century. Again, this is no one's fault. It happened one small step after one small step. It all seemed like a good idea at the time. The story goes something like this. Beginning around 11,000 years ago, we traveled a path from small egalitarian hunter-gatherer groups to farmers needing a growing labor force, which led to a growing population, which provided labor and required more labor, which led to a need for coordination and hierarchy, leading to trade among groups, and then need for defense against other growing communities. And in a geological wink, from 7 to 10,000 years ago, we began to see emergence of large civilizations with military forces, centralized governments, monotheistic religions, and stratified social structures. Such a path leads to exceeding the Earth's carrying capacity, and as talented as we humans are at expanding carrying capacity, and we are the best, looking for ever more room to grow, we spread resources far and wide and eventually lead to socioeconomic collapse as the costs of civilization exceed its productivity. And that leaves unsustainability to claim its due. That's what's happening today. However easy it may be to say that it's no one's fault, that doesn't mean that we should not or cannot take responsibility for the course of events once we are aware of how to do so. Certainly, we must fight to stop the clear-cutting of rainforests, toxic agriculture, depletion of resources, runaway technologies, and so forth. Today was not runaway technology. It was don't run at all technology. We have both. But we also do well to understand that all of these transgressions are an attempt to expand carrying capacity. That is our support base, our life support base. This is something that living things do as a matter of course. It is, in other terms, how we make a home. It's built into our biology. To dismiss our exceeding carrying capacity as human stupidity does not lead us to solutions. So here we are. Our biology and our progress traps are the cards we've been dealt. What can we do? It's pretty clear that globalization doesn't work very well, and it appears that the most effective ways for humans to survive and to reverse global warming and the sixth mass extinction, we don't have a math extinction, at least not yet, will be to live primarily on the local level, a surprisingly profound, though simple process, and to restore ecosystems on a global level by involving local communities worldwide. While progress traps are indeed traps, they are not inescapable ones. Appropriate non-destructive technologies are available and can be enhancements to human quality of life, span species well-being, and survival in the long term. And while nature's list of non-negotiable demands is daunting, we can meet them. All we have to do, in quotes, is scale up our contribution to planetary health from the current millions of acres we are caring for wisely to billions of acres everywhere. We already have the skill and knowledge we need to proceed, and it costs next to nothing in the scheme of things. The obstacles are in our heads and in our culture. So this leads us to today, the launch of a day of possibilities, a day of hope. So fasten your seatbelts. They're there, just look for them. On the good ship Life, as we spend a day traveling its land and waters, poking our way through its nooks and crannies, so that on a geological timescale, we may have a friendly and livable planet for at least a little bit longer. And thank you for joining us as we seize an abundant future from the jaws of collapse.